Hello, I'm Robert Royal, and I'm the editor-in-chief of The Catholic Thing, and these are the Catholic Thing podcasts. Catholic Thing is a daily series of columns that will arrive in your mailbox every morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. If you subscribe, and you can subscribe for free simply by going to www.thecatholicthing.org, all lowercase. We're happy to have with us again today. We're taping on March 9, 2024. Father Gerald Murray, who is known to all of our readers and our viewers here at the Catholic Thing podcast. And Diane Montagna is with us from Rome. Diane, of course, is a distinguished journalist who's accredited to the Holy See and did with Father Murray a book of interviews about the crises in the church and what to do about them. And I thought we'd have both of them on again today because they did an interview article in an article format for First Things just this past week about the continuing controversies over Fiducia Supplicans, which is the document of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith that has allowed blessings of same-sex couples and other irregular union couples. So welcome to you both. It's good to have you here. I want to encourage everyone who's listening or watching this to go to the First Things website and read the excerpt from the longer interview that's there, but also to dig into the longer interview because there's a lot at stake. Just this morning, and again, I want to say this is March 9, 2024. When I woke up, I noticed that the Coptic Orthodox Church has broken off dialogue with the Church, of the Catholic Church, over Fiducia. And also the Russian Catholic and Orthodox churches have been making some suggestions because they're dissatisfied with this document, which seems to them to at least confuse people about what's going on. So listen, even before we get to the specifics of the interviews that the interview that the two of you did in First Things, let me just start with a very broad brush question. And Father, I'd like to ask you about this first. Given this negative reaction, and not just the ones that I've just mentioned, but even much earlier, as we know, virtually the entire African continent has said that they will not be implementing Fiducia Supplicans. We've seen bishops' conferences in Hungary and in Poland and some other individual nations that have said basically the same thing. The Ukrainians are basically in revolt about this. What should we make of the claim that this really does not contradict anything in the past, that this is just an extension of blessings? And what is your reaction to these reactions, which I think is unprecedented in modern times?
It is unprecedented, Bob, and my reaction is that the Holy See has put itself in the position of being accused of not being faithful to revelation and to the natural law. So the Holy See is facing opposition not simply because people don't like a practical or governmental decision. In the past, bishops have complained about different things the Holy See would mandate. In this case, they're saying the Holy See has failed in its primary duty, which is to uphold the doctrine of the faith. And of course, it's not just the Catholics who are complaining. As you just mentioned, Orthodox Christians are complaining. I know on the Protestant side of the house here in the United States that many serious evangelicals are stunned that the Catholic Church would take this new approach to blessings, and they too are unhappy. So the reaction, I think, should be a wake-up call for the people in Rome to not only re-examine, but revoke this document. That's what we say in the interview, because it's not served any evangelical purpose.
Yeah, good. Diane, you're in Rome, and so what are you hearing with your various contacts, either in the Vatican or more generally in Rome and Italy?
Well, I think that as with many situations in the church, the way that the Vatican is handling this, Bob, is it absorbs the criticism. It absorbs the criticism in an attempt to have it dissipated. And I think that that's what we've seen from the Vatican side of things. But, as you pointed out when we opened, with the Coptic Orthodox saying that they're going to discontinue ecumenical dialogue with the Catholic Church is a very serious thing. And I think it's even more significant in the light of just back in May 2023, Pope Francis and the head of the Catholic or the Coptic Orthodox Church celebrated 50 years of that dialogue. Pope Francis allowed his name, they would, Twadros, I believe, Twadros II, to celebrate a Coptic Orthodox liturgy in the Basilica of St. John Lateran. He allowed him to speak at a Wednesday general audience. And it was on that day, at the Wednesday general audience, that Pope Francis announced that I'm sure that the viewers will remember the 21 Coptic Christians who were martyred in Libya at the hands of ISIS. Pope Francis announced at that general audience back in May, just in 2023, that they were going to be inserted into the Roman martyrology as martyrs. So it's quite a significant thing that the Coptic would simply break off ecumenical dialogue with the Catholic Church. And then in the same week, you have both the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Russia as well as the Moscow Patriarchate, the Orthodox, denouncing Fiducia Supplicans. So this has really wide impact for the universal church and for the unity of the church.
What did you mean by the fact that Rome absorbs this criticism?
Yes, well, this was actually, I mean, this is not original to me. I was listening probably about 4 years ago or so, Professor Roberto De Mattei, whom many of your viewers may know, an Italian historian, gave a talk. And he was, in part of this talk, he was describing how he thought that the Vatican, or his view over the years of how the Vatican will generally deal with crises. And he said, you know, the news goes out, but then the Vatican will just stay silent, let that news be sort of absorbed into itself in the attempt that it would be, or with the hope that it would be dissipated. And then the news goes away. And that often does happen. We have something else arise and things get forgotten. But I think that this is one case in which the news is not going away.
Yeah, I think that that's quite evident that you can adopt what politicians in America and all over the world do, given the way the news cycle is. And a week later, everybody thinks, oh, you're bringing up old news. But it is remarkable that it's been months that, of course, this document has been out there, and there still arise these explosions, so to speak, like with the Coptics and with the Russians. I'd like to dig down a little bit into the substance. I think we're going to continue to see these clashes, and it'll be interesting to see where they go. But let's dig down a little bit into the substance of this controversy, because as many of us noticed when Fiducia Supplicans first appeared, there was an attempt to kind of indirectly enlist St. John Henry Newman by saying that these blessings were development along the lines of the magisterium of Pope Francis, that that the previous ban on blessings of irregular couples, and particularly same-sex couples, was something different, because those blessings were so-called liturgical blessings, and what the Holy Father is aiming at here is so-called non-liturgical blessings, which are supposed to be spontaneous and brief and not connected with civil weddings between people. Father Murray, is this distinction, that there's been no change, that in fact this is sort of a side development, a new type of blessing? For you, does that hold water?
That argument doesn't hold water, Bob, because there's no history leading up to this of popular demand that the gospel be fulfilled by blessing same-sex couples, that somehow we were leaving out an important part of Christianity. A development of doctrine is when something that is contained in revelation but not fully explicated or defined arrives at that point, usually through magisterial intervention. So the idea that Cardinal Fernandez came up with, that this is a pastoral as opposed to a liturgical blessing, is also a contradiction, because what's happening here is a priestly blessing, and a priest, by his nature, by the office and the charism he enjoys through ordination, represents Christ the high priest, and blessing is one of the primary duties of a priest who's an intercessor, a mediator between God and men, the priest in the name of Christ calls down the favor of God upon people and things and relationships. It's all liturgical. The church's own documents stated that. We cite that in the interview. There is no such thing as a non-liturgical blessing. A blessing is a sacramental. Sacramentals are liturgical. Now, the idea that this is a popular blessing as opposed to liturgical also relies on the Directory on Popular Piety that was issued by the Holy See a number of years ago. Priestly actions are never identified as popular piety because they're not. Popular piety is the people of God. So a lot of double talk, and this is, as in many things that we've seen in life, it's a conclusion seeking a justification rather than the other way around, where we try to understand our actions and then justify them by virtue of properly identifying them.
What do you say to the people, and there were some who responded on the First Things website about this, that the blessing is there to encourage people in these irregular unions to lead a more uh, faithful life, that what's being blessed is not the sinful activity and union or relationship, whatever we want to call this, because it's hard to even specify it in Christian terms, but it's to encourage people to be more faithful to the gospel. Even the Holy Father, of course, has tried to argue, as has Cardinal Fernandez, that we're blessing the individuals, although the term couples obviously is used in the document itself. What do you make of that idea that this is an invitation, this is an accompaniment, kind of an extension of that idea that Pope Francis has been promoting during his papacy, that this is kind of an accompaniment and an outreach to sinners? We all are sinners, but in a special way, he's trying to include many people who seem to be excluded, primarily in the West, because obviously the all the protests that we talked about earlier are largely outside of Western Europe and North America.
Well, my simple answer is this is nonsense. This is false. You don't encourage people to live the gospel by blessing people who have just exchanged so-called wedding vows at a civil ceremony. And all you have to do is look at the films of people getting blessed by priests. They are aping what married couples do when they seek a blessing in church on their wedding. So the document itself says, and Diane and I discussed this, that Cardinal Fernandez says this document is in response to those who didn't share the conclusion of the earlier document, which forbade these blessings. So how do you satisfy those demands by claiming, well, we're doing nothing more than blessing individuals and asking them to, live according to gospel truth? The people in same-sex unions reject the gospel, and all they want to do is confirm in their sight and the sight of others that the church is fine with that. So this is why this thing is not being accepted in Africa. I don't know if, Diane, do you remember this discussion we had?
Diane, I want to put the question to you because Father's giving me a kind of an opening here. One of the things that we heard that was quite shocking after this document came out and all this controversy occurred, and even Cardinal Fernandez, after saying in the document that there would be no further comment on what was necessary for these blessings, he had to come out and actually explain that these would be brief, they would be non-formal, they would not be public, they'd largely just be kind of spontaneous, I think is the word that he used. But we've also heard, and I want to specifically draw on your expertise and your experience in Rome, we've also heard that St. Peter's is going to follow this declaration and provide so-called spontaneous blessings to irregular unions. Has that happened? I mean, when I saw this, I was actually shocked, but there, I haven't seen that anybody has done that. And when there were questions by somebody, maybe by you, the officials in the Vatican said, well, no one's asked yet, which is simply implausible. What have you heard about those blessings occurring actually in St. Peter's?
Yeah, actually, Bob, it's been very, very silent. We haven't heard anything of any blessings being given. One might imagine that as we draw close over the coming months, closer to the synod, next October synod, that there might be some sort of publicity about these blessings happening at St. Peter's. But honestly, it's been silent. To go back to what Father Murray and you were both discussing regarding the the interpretation of the document, that it's there in order to invite people who otherwise maybe feel alienated from the church. Two things. If it's just about blessing individuals and not really about blessing couples, two comments on that. The 2020 responsum, while answering in the negative to whether the church has the power to bless the unions between people of the same sex, the church said no, but they said that this does not preclude the blessing of individuals who have same-sex tendencies, but who are seeking to live the gospel. So if that was true and said already in the 2021 responsum, what was the need for Fiducia Supplicans? That had already been expressed by the church. Secondly, there's been so much confusion about this document. That is, if it was really only about blessing individuals, which subsequent to the document, both Cardinal Fernandez and Pope Francis have said, why did you write the document in the way that you wrote the document? Why is the heading about blessing same-sex couples? That could have been easily corrected. Or you could retract the document now and say, excuse us, we really made a mistake. We didn't realize there would be so much confusion about this document. We will be reissuing it with some clarifications. That's completely within their power to do, and they're not doing it. So the document stands as the document. That is, it's not for us just to interpret, to interpret it in the way that what we would like it to say, but it says what it says. And so we need to take that at face value.
Mm-hmm. Father Murray, Gavin Ashenden, who used to be a spiritual advisor to Queen Elizabeth II, but has since converted to Catholicism, wrote in a very interesting article in Touchstone magazine that, I mean, here's a man who left a very prominent position in the Church of England and obviously is sensitive about what is happening in his new church, which he came over to because of conscience and intellectual reasons and spiritual reasons. He said that this document actually now kind of short circuits the Catholic Church's ability to tell people to convert and follow the gospel. Is that how you think we ought to think about it? That we've kind of given up on telling people to repent? That we're more interested somehow in inclusiveness than we are in holiness. Is that your perception too?
Yeah, actually, because yes, it is. And as typical, Cardinal Fernandez is not a good debater, so he puts forth arguments that are off the center and don't answer the main objection. He said, no one should think that this blessing pattern implies a recognition by the church of so-called same-sex marriage. That's not the problem. The problem with the document is it gives the impression the church approves of same-sex activities. In other words, the people who commit unnatural sex acts with each other, there's no problem with that because you're blessing the relationship that allows that to happen. So yes, his critique, and this is what's behind the African objections, by the way, and I'm quite upset when I hear people, including the Pope, say, well, African culture doesn't permit this. And that's the reason why, we're going to give them an exception to the rule. The Africans are not here defending pagan traditions from, Neolithic times. They're defending the gospel they embraced or their parents embraced when the missionaries came. And that gospel is liberating. So, yeah, I think Gavin Ashenden has hit something central and crucial in why this thing is such a problem in the life of the church. It really comes down to a question more of, let's say, the modern approach to reality. Is reality a given that we have to conform to, or is it subject to our manipulation such that we can create a new reality? The church has always taught number one. I'm sorry to say the Holy See is teaching number two right now.
Yeah. We're getting near the end of our
Yeah.
time. But you want to jump in on this, Diane?
Yeah, I want to add something. I'd like to add something. There's something else that we're not talking about. And Father just mentioned reality. The reality is that we're all going to die. I've been doing a little bit of Lenten reading, St. Catherine of Genoa's treatise on purgatory. which is a classic of the church. And just in the beginning chapters, she talks about how when we die, and this is Catholic teaching, when we die, if our will is fixed on sin, on mortal sin, it's fixed forever in that way. Whereas if our will is fixed in the good, repentant of our sins, acknowledging that we're sinners, then there's hope for salvation, purgatory onto heaven or straight to heaven as God so wills. So when I was reading it, I thought of Fiducia Supplicans, because I thought, we're all going to die. To lead people to believe that it's okay to continue on in these relationships. That is, we're going to bless your relationship so that all that is good and true and whatever the document says may be brought in line with the gospel. It's still a dangerous place to put people, dangerous situation to put people into, with the reality of what happens at death. That's our last chance. That's it. And the Lord says, we know neither, you know neither the day nor the hour. And that's true for all of us. So I don't think that this document really serves the people to whom it's addressed.
At the Catholic thing, our charism is brevity, and we're near the end of our time right now. So I'm just going to ask both of you individually, quickly, to respond to this question. You actually gave in your title the idea that this document should be revoked, retracted, whatever we wanted to call it. What are the odds of that, Father?
0 in this pontificate, quite good in the next. That's my thought. And if that may sound disruptive, it's not. I think the Pope has made a big error, and he's only doubled down on it. The next Pope, I think, will stop it.
Okay. Diane?
I concur.
So do I. So we are all three in Christian harmony here at the Catholic Thing website. Okay, there's a lot more to say, and no doubt I'll have you both back very soon to say it. So thank you, Diane Montagna. Follow Diane's work on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now X, and in various publications, the Catholic Register, etc. Father Murray, of course, is everywhere, and he and I we have been long in the trenches in the papal posse on EWTN. So thank you both, and thank all you,
Thanks, Bob.
listeners and viewers for this podcast of the Catholic Thing on the continuing controversies and problems with Fiducia Supplicans. We'll see you again next time.